2 moons, 1 love. The universe doesn't care about your plans. Dr. Sarah Chen learned this truth at precisely 1447 Universal Time, when her research vessel collided with something that shouldn't exist. The computer called it a dimensional anomaly. Sarah called it the end of everything she knew. Metal screamed. Oxygen hissed into vacuum. The 6 other crew members died before they could even scream back. Sarah's escape pod tumbled through space like a coin flipped by an indifferent god, and she had exactly enough time to think one coherent thought. This is how I die. But she didn't die. Not yet. The pod smashed into ice at terminal velocity, systems shrieking their failure, and Sarah's consciousness flickered like a damaged light. When awareness returned, it brought pain. Her ribs were broken. Blood filled her mouth with copper taste. The heads-up display showed 12 hours of oxygen remaining. She'd crashed on Europa 7, an unnamed moon in Jupiter's orbit. Temperatures outside hovered at negative 200 degrees Celsius. No rescue was coming. Not in 12 hours. Probably not ever. Sarah tried to move and discovered her legs still worked. Small mercies. She dragged herself to the viewport, wiped frost from the glass with a shaking hand, and saw something impossible. Another crash site, maybe 300 meters away, across a field of fractured ice. And something was moving in the wreckage. The thing that crawled from the alien ship didn't look like any extraterrestrial Sarah had imagined during her 12 years studying astrobiology. No tentacles, no insectoid armor, no technological perfection. It looked like someone had carved a human figure from living crystal and filled it with colored light. 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered but graceful, skin that wasn't quite skin, more like faceted glass over a body of pure bioluminescence. Patterns shifted across its surface, blues and greens and colors Sarah had no names for, cycling in waves that might have been breathing, might have been communication, might have been pain. It was bleeding. The blood was blue, luminescent, and it left a trail in the ice as the creature dragged itself toward its shattered vessel. Sarah's scientist brain cataloged details automatically. Bilateral symmetry, 2 arms, 2 legs, head distinct from torso. But the face was all wrong. No mouth that she could see, no nose, just 2 large eyes like polished obsidian and patterns of light that pulsed beneath translucent skin. The creature reached its ship, touched the hull, and the metal responded. A door irised open. The thing pulled itself inside and disappeared. Sarah sat in her dying pod and did the math. 12 hours of oxygen. Maybe 24 if she rationed carefully and stayed perfectly still. The temperature inside the pod was already dropping. Life support was failing. Her radio was dead. The distress beacon might reach someone eventually, but eventually meant months at minimum. Her water would last 3 days, food 5. She would freeze before she starved. But that other ship, even wrecked, it might have power, might have supplies, might have a working beacon, and it definitely had something alive inside it. Sarah looked at her reflection in the frost-covered glass. 34 years old, face thin from months in space, dark eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She'd come on this expedition to escape Earth, to escape a terminal diagnosis, and die somewhere beautiful instead of in a sterile hospital room. Well, she was going to get her wish. She sealed her emergency suit, checked the oxygen tank, 6 hours, portable, and opened the hatch. Europa 7's surface was a nightmare of frozen methane and ammonia ice. Sarah's boots found minimal traction. Every step required calculation. Fall here and you don't get up. The suit's heating elements struggled against the cold. Her breath came in gasps that the suit's recycler could barely keep up with. 300 meters. She counted steps to stay focused. 100 steps, 200, 250. The alien ship was larger than it had appeared from a distance. The hull was smooth, organic-looking, like something grown rather than built. The metal, if it was metal, pulsed with faint internal light. The damage was extensive. Whatever caused the collision had torn the vessel nearly in half. Sarah reached the open door and stopped. What was she doing? Walking into an alien spacecraft? Approaching a creature she couldn't communicate with? She had no weapons, no leverage, nothing but desperation and dying oxygen. She stepped inside. The atmosphere hit her like a wall. Wrong temperature, wrong pressure, wrong smell. Her sensors went mad. Ammonia, methane, nitrogen compounds, trace elements her database couldn't identify. Lethal to humans in seconds without protection. The interior was beautiful. Walls that glowed softly, providing light. Organic curves instead of hard corners. Everything flowing together like the inside of a shell. And at the center of the main chamber, the creature sat against what might have been a control console. It saw her, the obsidian eyes fixed on Sarah with intelligence that was unmistakable. They stared at each other across 3 meters and 3 billion years of evolution. Sarah raised her hands slowly, palms out. Universal gesture. I mean no harm. The creature's patterns shifted. Rapid pulses of red and orange that Sarah's instincts read as alarm. It tried to stand and collapsed. More blue blood spread across the floor. It was dying too. Sarah did something foolish then. She removed her helmet. The alien atmosphere seared her lungs. She had maybe 30 seconds before she'd pass out, but she needed the creature to see her face, to understand. She pointed at herself. Sarah. She touched her chest. Sarah. The creature's patterns flickered. It raised one crystalline hand and touched its own chest. The gesture released a sound, not from a mouth, but vibrating through its entire body, like wind through frozen metal, like music played on crystal chimes. Sarah couldn't reproduce that sound. She tried anyway. Kael. Close enough. Kael. The creature, Kael, pulsed soft blue. Sarah chose to interpret it as acknowledgement. She put her helmet back on, oxygen flooding her lungs. Kael watched. Those obsidian eyes tracked her every movement. Sarah pointed at the blood, pointed at Kael, made a gesture of injury, then pointed at herself and mimed helping. Basic communication. We're both dying. Maybe we can die slower together. Kael's patterns shifted through colors Sarah couldn't interpret, but then he raised one hand and pointed toward the back of the ship. An invitation, or maybe a surrender. Sarah followed. The next 6 hours taught Sarah more about extraterrestrial biology than 12 years of study. Kael's species, she'd call them the Vel'tari until she learned their real name, were silicon-based rather than carbon. Their blood used a copper compound instead of iron, hence the blue color. They breathed an ammonia-nitrogen mix that would kill a human instantly. But they could think, they could learn, and they could bleed to death just like anything else. Sarah found Kael's medical supplies through trial and error. The ship's systems were partially functional, powered by what looked like a contained fusion reactor. Kael couldn't survive in her oxygen-rich environment any more than she could survive in his. But between them, they had 2 damaged ships with different but complementary resources. Sarah's pod had oxygen, water reclamation, human-compatible medical supplies. Kael's ship had power, better structural integrity, and life support that could maintain his atmosphere. Neither vessel was spaceworthy. Both were slowly failing. But together, they might buy time. Sarah dragged supply containers between crash sites. Kael, even injured, was stronger than her. He moved components she couldn't budge. They worked without speaking, communicating through gesture and necessity. By hour 12, they'd established a border zone, an airlock chamber between their two sections where they could see each other through transparent barriers. Sarah wore her oxygen mask in his section. Kael wore a breathing apparatus in hers. Neither could survive more than minutes in the other's atmosphere. By hour 18, Sarah activated her distress beacon. The signal would travel at light speed toward the nearest human outpost, Europa station, 43 light minutes away. Even if they received it immediately, rescue would take weeks, more likely months. The computer calculated minimum arrival time, 200 days. Sarah looked at Kael through the transparent barrier. He sat on his side, crystalline hands pressed against his injury. His patterns pulsed slow crimson. Pain, she guessed, or maybe resignation. She pressed her hand against the barrier. He looked up, obsidian eyes meeting hers. 200 days. They'd either kill each other or learn to live. Day 7. The grammar of touch. Humans, Sarah reflected, were auditory creatures. They made sounds, organized sounds into language, and threw those sounds at each other until meaning emerged. The Vel'tari weren't. Kael communicated through his skin. The patterns that cycled across his crystalline surface weren't decorative. They were words, sentences, entire conversations written in color and rhythm, flashing too fast for Sarah's eyes to catch individual meanings. She'd been trying to learn his language for 7 days now, and she felt like a deaf person trying to understand music. But she was trying, because the alternative was dying alone. Sarah sat in the border zone with a tablet, stylus in hand. She'd drawn pictures, simple concepts. Circle with rays, sun. Circle without rays, moon. Wavy lines, water. Stick figure, human. She pointed to each drawing, said the English word, and waited for Kael to respond. He pulsed patterns, rapid shifts of color that Sarah's tablet camera tried to record. Later, she'd review the footage frame by frame, trying to identify repeated sequences, trying to build a dictionary from light. It was working, slowly, so slowly. Kael pointed at the drawing of the sun, pulsed amber gold. Sarah wrote, sun equals amber gold. He pointed at the moon drawing, pulsed silver white. Moon equals silver white. Simple concepts, nouns, objects that existed outside both of them. The hard part was emotions. On day 5, Sarah had cut her hand on sharp metal while moving supplies. Blood welled up, shockingly red against her pale skin. She'd gasped in pain, and Kael had reacted instantly. His patterns had exploded into rapid-fire colors Sarah had never seen before. Electric purple, sharp yellow, deep crimson all at once. He'd pressed against his side of the barrier, hand reaching toward her injury as if he could bridge the gap through will alone. Sarah had stared at him, blood dripping between her fingers. "It's okay," she'd said stupidly. "Just a cut." But Kael didn't understand English yet. All he knew was pain. All he'd seen was her bleeding. He'd disappeared into his section and returned with a translucent gel in a container. He'd placed it in the small airlock chamber they used to transfer objects, made urgent gestures. "Use this." Sarah had applied the gel. The pain had vanished instantly, and the wound had sealed within minutes. Vel'tari medical technology was impressive, but more impressive was the fact that Kael had helped her, had wanted to help her, had been distressed by her injury. Now, 2 days later, Sarah tried to create symbols for emotions. She drew a face with an upturned mouth, happy; face with downturned mouth, sad; face with jagged lines, pain. She acted out each emotion, exaggerating her expressions. Kael watched intently. Then he pulsed through colors: soft gold for happy, deep blue for sad, sharp red for pain. Sarah wrote frantically, building her dictionary. Gold equals happiness. Blue equals sadness.
Red equals pain. She was so focused on the tablet that she almost missed what happened next. Kael stood, moved close to the barrier, and deliberately cycled through colors slowly. Gold, silver, amber, violet, purple. Each color held for 3 full seconds. Then he pointed at Sarah and waited. He wanted her to tell him what these colors meant. He was teaching her vocabulary. Sarah felt something crack in her chest. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was reaching across an impossible gap because they both needed to be understood. "Okay," she whispered. "Teach me." By day 14, they had a working vocabulary of 300 symbols. It wasn't elegant. Half-drawn pictures, color sequences, crude pantomime. But it was communication. Sarah learned that Kael's ship had also been on a routine mission, surveying the same region of space from the opposite direction. The collision had been mutual suicide, neither vessel able to avoid the other in time. His crew was dead too, 6 of them, like Sarah's. He'd been the pilot, the one in the reinforced command chamber, the only survivor by accident of position. She learned that the Vel'tari came from a trinary star system 47 light-years away, that they achieved faster-than-light travel through dimensional folding, which is why they'd appeared so suddenly in Jupiter's orbit. That Kael had been making these runs for 16 years, though she had to convert, because Vel'tari years were different from Earth years. He was 43 by his counting, older than her by 9 years, but somehow that didn't matter. She learned that Vel'tari didn't sleep the way humans did. They entered a rest state for brief periods, patterns dimming to near darkness. She learned that they absorb nutrition through specialized pores rather than eating solid food. She learned that they could perceive wavelengths of light humans couldn't, could hear frequencies beyond human range. They were so fundamentally different that any connection should have been impossible. But here's what Sarah didn't expect to learn. Kael was lonely. She recognized it in the way his patterns brightened when she entered the border zone, in the way he positioned himself to always face her direction, in the way he'd started creating small objects from scrap metal. Gifts, she realized. Sculptures that caught the light beautifully. He'd placed them in the airlock chamber for her to take. She kept them lined up in her section. 6 small sculptures of increasing complexity. The latest one looked like 2 moons orbiting each other. Sarah had started doing something equally foolish. She'd salvaged a solar panel from her pod and rigged it to generate electricity. Then she'd connected it to her tablet speakers. Twice a day, she played music. She had one audio file that had survived the crash, Debussy's Clair de Lune. Piano music, ancient and beautiful. She played it during what she'd started thinking of as their meals, times when they'd both taken sustenance, facing each other through the barrier. The first time she'd played it, Kael had frozen. His patterns had gone completely still. Then, slowly, they'd begun to pulse in rhythm with the music, not matching it, his biology couldn't do that, but responding to it, creating harmonics, adding layers. He could hear frequencies in the music that Sarah couldn't, was probably hearing entire melodies she was deaf to, but they were sharing it anyway. On day 14, after the music ended, Sarah spoke without thinking. "I miss it." Kael tilted his head, a gesture he'd learned from watching me. Question. "Home," Sarah said. She drew a quick picture. A planet, blue and green. "Earth, I miss it." She didn't expect him to understand, but Kael pulsed slow amber, then drew his own picture. 3 stars arranged in a triangle with a planet orbiting the central star. Home. His home. They sat in silence, looking at each other's drawings. 2 beings from opposite ends of the galaxy, both exiles now, both orphans of the same catastrophe. Sarah pressed her hand against the barrier. On the other side, Kael raised his crystalline hand and aligned it with hers. The barrier was 2 centimeters thick, but for a moment, it felt like nothing at all.
Day 45. When the body fails. The radiation should have killed Sarah weeks ago. Europa 7 had no magnetic field, no atmosphere to speak of. Jupiter's radiation belts bombarded the surface constantly. Sarah's pod had some shielding, but she spent hours every day outside it, moving between sections, maintaining systems. The suit helped. Not enough. By day 42, she'd started feeling the symptoms. Nausea, fatigue, headaches that felt like her skull was cracking. By day 44, her hair was coming out in clumps. By day 45, she couldn't get out of bed. Kael found her there, collapsed in her section, too weak to respond to his signals. She barely registered him entering her atmosphere zone with his breathing apparatus, barely felt him lifting her with surprising gentleness. The fever came in waves. Sarah's temperature spiked to 40 degrees Celsius. She was burning from the inside out, cells dying faster than her body could replace them. She drifted in and out of consciousness, and in the lucid moments, she understood what was happening. Acute radiation syndrome, advanced stage. No treatment available with her medical supplies. She'd studied it in training, never expecting to experience it. The textbook said death came in 2 to 3 weeks at this level of exposure. She'd made it 45 days. Impressive, really. In her fever dreams, Sarah saw Earth, saw her mother's garden in Shanghai, peonies blooming pink and white, saw her father's face the day she'd told him about the diagnosis, early onset genetic deterioration, no cure, 5 years maximum. He'd cried. Sarah hadn't. She had already decided to die among the stars instead of wasting away in a hospital. Well, she'd gotten her wish. Something cool touched her forehead. Sarah's eyes fluttered open. Kael knelt beside her bed, his breathing apparatus secured, his crystalline hand resting against her skin. His patterns were going crazy. Rapid pulses of red and orange, and a color she'd never seen before. Almost ultraviolet, at the edge of her vision. Distress. Fear. The colors she associated with, no, not this, please not this. Sorry, Sarah whispered. Her voice was rough, throat raw. Should have been more careful. Radiation. Kael's patterns shifted, deep blue. Grief? Understanding? She couldn't tell anymore. The fever was scrambling her thoughts. He stood, disappeared, probably going back to his section, probably accepting the inevitable. Sarah closed her eyes. At least she'd made it this far. At least she'd learned his language. At least... Kael returned. He was holding something, a small device that pulsed with the same internal light as his body. He knelt beside her again, held the device against her chest, then removed his breathing apparatus. No! Sarah tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't obey. The oxygen! Kael's hand pressed firmly against her sternum. His skin was warm, warmer than she'd expected. The device activated, humming at a frequency she felt in her bones. Then Kael's other hand touched her forehead and everything changed. Energy flooded through Sarah's body, not electricity, something else, something organic and controlled. It moved through her nervous system like fire, but fire that healed instead of destroyed. Her cells responded. Radiation-damaged DNA began repairing itself, dying tissue regenerated. The fever broke in an instant, sweat cooling on her skin. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then Kael collapsed. Sarah caught him on instinct, pulled him back, jammed his breathing apparatus back onto his face. He'd been in my oxygen atmosphere for nearly a minute, lethal exposure for his biology. His patterns were dim, barely visible. His body felt heavy, lifeless. No, 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 Sarah chanted. She dragged him back into the border zone, into his atmosphere. Kael, please, come on. His patterns flickered, dimmed to almost nothing, went dark. For 3 days, Kael didn't move. Sarah spent those 3 days learning what real fear felt like. She'd checked his vital signs with my medical scanner, crude measurements, but enough to confirm he was alive. Breathing, hearts beating. Yes, plural. He had 3 hearts arranged in a triangle in his chest cavity. But he was in some kind of coma. his body unresponsive, patterns completely dark. She'd moved him to his rest chamber, arranged him as comfortably as she could. She'd sat by the barrier for hours, watching for any sign of change. Nothing. On the second day, she'd started talking to him. Not teaching, not trying to communicate information, just talking. "You're an idiot," she said. "You know that? Removing your breathing apparatus in an oxygen atmosphere? You could have died. You almost died. For what? To save a human you've known for 45 days?" Silence. Darkness. "I was fine with dying. I came out here to die. Did I tell you that? I have a genetic condition. Had. Might still have. I don't know what you did to me. My cells deteriorate faster than normal. 5 years, they told me. 5 years until I'm bedridden. Can't remember my own name, can't feed myself. So I volunteered for the Europa mission. Figured dying in space was better than dying in a hospital." Well, she'd gotten her wish. On the third day, Kael's patterns flickered. Faint amber, then brighter. His eyes opened. Sarah nearly sobbed with relief. "You're awake. Don't ever do that again. Do you hear me? Don't ever—" Kael sat up slowly, patterns pulsing weak gold. He looked at Sarah through the barrier, then raised one hand and placed it against the glass. Sarah matched the gesture, their palms aligned, 2 centimeters and 3 billion years apart. Kael's patterns shifted. Complex sequences that Sarah recognized. "Are you well?" "Yes, I'm well. Better than well. You healed me. How did you— what did you do?" More patterns. Slower now, because Kael was still weak. Sarah had to concentrate to parse the meaning. "My species can transfer bioenergy in emergencies to save important ones." "Important ones?" Sarah stared at him. "Important?" Kael pulsed soft rose gold, a color she'd never seen in him before. He held up his other hand and made a gesture they'd developed, 2 circles overlapping, the symbol they'd created for together. "Yeah," Sarah said, softly. "Together." She didn't move her hand from the barrier, neither did he. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing different atmospheres, living different biologies, but somehow sharing the same space.
Day 89. The invention of play. Kael didn't understand games. Sarah had tried to explain the concept 3 times now, and each time, Kael's patterns shifted to confused violet. Games. Competition. Playing to win? None of it made sense to Vel'tari biology. "Okay," Sarah said, scratching marks into a piece of metal with a cutting tool. "Look, this is tic-tac-toe. Ancient human game. You make a 3x3 grid, and players take turns marking X or O in the spaces. First person to get 3 in a row wins." She demonstrated, playing both sides. Kael watched intently, then pulsed questioning amber. "What's the point?" Sarah interpreted. "The point is to win, to be better than your opponent." Kael's patterns shifted through several colors rapidly. Sarah had learned to read his more complex thoughts now. But if one wins, one loses. Why create deliberate imbalance? Why not work together to achieve harmony? Sarah laughed. "Because humans are competitive. We like challenges. We like proving we're smarter or faster or better. It's fun." Kael tilted his head, that learned gesture. "Fun?" "Enjoyment, pleasure. Something you do not because you need to, but because you want to. Don't the Vel'tari play?" Kael's patterns went still for a moment. Then, "We create harmony. We build patterns together. We solve problems cooperatively. Play? Individual achievement? This is foreign." "So your entire species just cooperates all the time? No competition?" "Competition is wasteful. Why compete when cooperation yields better results?" Sarah considered this, a species that had evolved without competition, without winners and losers, without the drive to dominate. It explained a lot about Kael's behavior. He never tried to claim more space in their shared habitat, never hoarded supplies.
always checked if Sarah needed something before using it himself. "Okay," Sarah said, "forget tic-tac-toe. Let's try something different, a game where we work together instead of against each other." She spent the next hour creating a new kind of game. Each of them would take turns building something, anything, from the scrap materials scattered around their habitat. No competition, no winning. Just alternating acts of creation, each addition building on what went before. Kael understood this immediately. His patterns brightened to excited gold. Sarah started. She took 3 pieces of bent metal and welded them into a triangular frame. "Your turn." Kael disappeared into his section and returned with crystalline filaments, something he'd salvaged from his ship's shattered hull. He wove them through Sarah's triangular frame, creating a web of light-catching strands. Sarah's turn. She found a broken solar panel, cracked but still reflective. She positioned it to catch Europa's dim sunlight and reflect it through Kael's crystal web. Kael's turn. He added small pieces of luminescent metal that glowed with their own light, creating layers of illumination. They worked for 3 hours, building, adding, transforming. When they finished, they had something neither could have created alone, a sculpture that caught light from multiple sources, refracted it through crystal, reflected it back in changing patterns. It looked like frozen music, like light given form. Sarah stared at it, then looked at Kael. He was pulsing steady gold, happiness, but also something else, that rose gold color he'd shown before, the one her rough translations suggested meant soul bond recognition. "It's beautiful," Sarah said quietly. Kael nodded, another learned gesture. Then he moved to his rest chamber and returned with something small. He placed it in the airlock chamber, a bracelet woven from copper wire, its design impossibly intricate. Sarah took it, turned it over in her hands. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each wire had been shaped, bent, woven with precision beyond human capability. "When did you make this?" Kael's patterns shifted. "During rest periods, 12 days, for you." Sarah's throat tightened. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It fit perfectly. "Thank you." She had nothing equivalent to give him, but she disappeared into her section and returned with her tablet. She opened her photo gallery, one of the few files that had survived the crash, pictures of Earth, Shanghai's gardens, her parents, her lab, and one video, her niece's 3rd birthday party, the little girl laughing as she blew out candles. She played the video through the barrier. Kael watched, patterns cycling through colors Sarah was still learning. Wonder? Curiosity? Longing? When it ended, Kael pulsed gentle amber. Then he created a sound. That wind through metal vibration, but softer, melodic. He was trying to imitate the little girl's laughter. Sarah's eyes stung. She pressed her hand against the barrier. "Her name is May, my niece. She'd be 4 now. 4 years old, and I've been gone for 7 months, and she probably doesn't remember me anymore." Kael matched her gesture, hand against the barrier. His patterns pulsed slow, comforting colors. They stayed like that until Sarah's air alarm chimed. Time to return to her section for oxygen cycling. But before she left, she did something new. She touched her fingertips to her lips, then pressed them against the barrier. Kael's patterns flared bright. Question mark? "It's called a kiss. Humans do it to show affection, to show we care about someone." Kael studied her, then mimicked the gesture, touched his crystalline fingers to where his mouth might be, though he had no mouth, and pressed them against the barrier from his side. Sarah laughed. Quick learner. That night, lying in her bunk, Sarah looked at the bracelet on her wrist. She thought about games and gifts and gestures of affection. She thought about how Kael almost died saving her life. She thought about the sculpture they'd built together, light and crystal, in harmony. She thought about having 111 days left until rescue arrived, and she realized, with a feeling like falling, that she didn't want to leave. Day 112. The storm.
Jupiter's solar storms were predictable in the abstract, catastrophic in the particular. Sarah had been tracking the radiation forecasts for weeks, and she'd known this one was coming. Class X solar flare, massive coronal mass ejection, radiation levels that would fry any unshielded electronics. What she hadn't anticipated was the power failure. The storm hit at what Sarah had started thinking of as evening, the arbitrary time when she dimmed her section's lights to simulate Earth's day-night cycle. Kael was in his rest state. Sarah was reviewing their supply calculations when every system shut down at once. Total darkness. Total silence, except for the howl of charged particles hammering the hull. Sarah's emergency lights flickered on after 3 seconds. Chemical reaction, no electronics required. But Kael's section stayed dark. Completely dark. Sarah pressed against the barrier, trying to see through. Nothing. Even Kael's bioluminescent patterns weren't visible. The storm must have knocked out his ship's power core completely. Then she heard it. That wind-through-metal sound, but wrong. High-pitched. Rapid. The sound of distress. Kael was terrified. Sarah's mind raced. Vel'tari fear of darkness. She'd noted it in her observations but never connected the dots. A species that communicated through light, whose biology was based on bioluminescence, whose senses were tuned to wavelengths of radiance. Darkness wouldn't just be uncomfortable, it would be sensory deprivation, disorientation, existential horror. She grabbed her emergency lantern and ran to the border zone. "Kael, I'm here. Can you hear me?" The distress sound intensified. She could hear him moving frantically in the darkness, crashing into objects. He was panicking. Sarah made a decision that could kill them both. She opened the airlock chamber, flooded it with her oxygen-rich atmosphere, and climbed through into Kael's section without breathing apparatus. Her lungs seized immediately. The ammonia-nitrogen mix was toxic. She had maybe 30 seconds before she'd pass out. The cold was intense. Her suit's heating elements were on backup power, barely functioning. But she had light. She held the lantern high. "Kael, follow the light." She saw him then, frozen against the far wall, crystalline body pressed into the corner like a trapped animal. His patterns were completely dark, not by choice, but by terror. His obsidian eyes reflected her lantern like mirrors. Sarah stumbled toward him. 20 seconds. Her vision was already tunneling. She reached out, grabbed his arm, solid and cold under her gloved hand, and pulled. "Come on, this way." Kael moved, responding to touch when sight had failed him. Sarah dragged him toward the border zone. 15 seconds. Her legs weren't working right anymore. They fell together into the airlock chamber. Sarah's hands were shaking too badly to work the controls. 10 seconds. She was going to die here, wasn't she? 30 seconds had been optimistic. 5 seconds. Kael's hand covered hers. He was functional again, seeing her by the lantern's light. He operated the airlock controls with precision, sealed the chamber, flooded it with oxygen. Sarah's lungs drew in air, and she coughed so violently she thought she'd break ribs. Kael supported her, his breathing apparatus secured, his patterns pulsing frantic colors. When Sarah could breathe again, she looked up at him. "You okay?" Kael's patterns shifted. Deep blue. Shame? "I am weak. Darkness is... I cannot..." "Hey," Sarah squeezed his arm. "Everyone's afraid of something. You saved me when I was dying. I can carry a flashlight in a storm." They sat together in the airlock chamber, the only space where both their atmospheres could mix in non-lethal ratios. The storm raged outside. Systems stayed down, but Sarah kept the lantern burning, and Kael's patterns slowly returned to normal. After a while, Kael moved closer. Deliberately closer, until they were side by side,
shoulders almost touching through their respective suits. The physical proximity was unprecedented. They'd always maintained careful distance, aware of their biological incompatibilities. But now Kael was close enough that Sarah could see the incredible detail of his crystalline structure, the fractal patterns that repeated at every scale, the way colors shifted in waves beneath his translucent skin. He was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with human aesthetics, utterly alien, utterly himself. Kael raised his hand slowly, telegraphing his intention. Sarah understood. She removed her glove. He removed his environmental protection. They both knew this was dangerous. His body temperature was 15 degrees below what humans could tolerate. Her body heat could damage his delicate crystalline structures. But they reached out anyway, skin to skin for the first time. Sarah's palm against Kael's palm. The sensation was electric, not metaphorically, literally. Sarah felt current flowing between them, Kael's bioenergy interfacing with her nervous system, her warmth spreading into his crystalline matrix, information exchanged at the cellular level, understanding without words. She felt his fear of the darkness, primal, overwhelming, like a human drowning. He felt her loneliness, the ache of being 43 light minutes from everything she'd ever known, the grief of watching her crew die, the terror of slow death by radiation. They felt each other's wonder, the impossible miracle of this meeting. Two beings from opposite ends of the galaxy, touching despite every law that said they shouldn't exist in the same space. Sarah's medical scanner, still functioning on backup battery, began beeping urgently. Her core temperature was dropping. Kael's crystalline structures were developing microfractures from her heat. They had perhaps 2 minutes before permanent damage. They held on for 1 minute and 59 seconds. Then, reluctantly, they pulled apart. Kael's patterns cycled through colors so complex Sarah couldn't parse them. Her translator brain tried anyway. Sacred, profound, impossible. Right. Yeah, Sarah whispered, flexing her frozen fingers. That's... yeah. The storm raged for 6 more hours. They spent it in the airlock chamber, close but not touching, Sarah's lantern burning between them. They didn't sleep. They didn't speak. They just existed in each other's presence while the universe tried to kill them both. When the storm finally passed and primary power restored, Kael helped Sarah back to her section. At the barrier, he stopped, placed his hand against the transparent surface, pulsed a sequence of colors Sarah had been studying for weeks. She knew this one. She'd seen it in their communication records, had tried to define it, but always came close but never quite captured it. The Vel'tari concept had no direct English translation. The closest approximations were soul bond, life partner, one who shares existence, chosen above all others. Sarah pressed her hand against his from the other side. "I don't have the colors to answer you," she said, "but if I could glow, I'd be showing you the same thing." Kael's patterns flared rose gold, brilliant, unmistakable. They stood like that until Sarah's exhaustion forced her to sleep. But for the first time since the crash, she didn't dream of dying. She dreamed of touching crystalline skin, of colors she had no names for, of a connection that transcended biology. She dreamed of 134 days remaining. And she realized she was counting wrong. Not days until rescue, days until they'd be forced apart.
Day 134. The impossible made real. Sarah woke up vomiting. She barely made it to the waste recycler before her stomach emptied itself violently. When the convulsions stopped, she slumped against the cold wall, gasping. Food poisoning? Unlikely. She'd been eating the same protein bars for months. Stress? Maybe. Radiation after effects? Possible. She tried to stand, and the world tilted sideways.
Her vision grayed. She grabbed onto the wall for support and waited for equilibrium to return. It didn't. The nausea came in waves. She vomited again and again, until there was nothing left and her body still heaved with dry convulsions. Kael found her there, collapsed beside the recycler, too weak to move. His patterns flashed alarm red. He couldn't enter her section, his breathing apparatus was in for repairs, and the atmospheric incompatibility was lethal. But he could activate the medical scanner remotely, could project the results onto the display screen they'd installed in the border zone. Sarah crawled to the barrier, collapsed against it. Don't know. What's wrong? So tired. Kael's patterns cycled frantically while he worked the scanner. Sarah closed her eyes. Maybe this was it. Maybe whatever he'd done to heal her radiation damage had only delayed the inevitable. Maybe her body was finally giving up. She was almost okay with that. Almost. Except she'd wanted more time with Kael, wanted to learn all his colors, wanted to understand how a silicone-based being could make her feel more seen than any human ever had. The scanner beeped. Long. Insistent. Wrong. Sarah opened her eyes, looked at the display, saw readings that made no biological sense. Elevated hormone levels, specifically human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, the pregnancy hormone. Sarah stared at the screen, read the numbers again, checked the calibration. The numbers didn't change. She was pregnant. Impossible. Completely impossible. She'd been in space for months with no male human contact. Unless the scanner was malfunctioning, unless the 30-minute contact sessions. Sarah and Kael had developed a rhythm over the past 3 weeks. Every 3 days, she'd adjust the atmospheric controls in a small chamber they'd rigged, creating a hybrid environment. 60% her oxygen, 40% his ammonia-nitrogen. Neither could breathe it comfortably, but both could survive it for 30 minutes. 30 minutes where they could stand together without barriers, where they could touch, where they could communicate through the direct bioenergy exchange that seemed to happen when their skin contacted. It had been intimate, profound, sacred even, but Sarah had never imagined it could be reproductive. They weren't even the same kind of matter. Carbon and silicone, DNA and crystalline information storage, incompatible at every level. Except they weren't incompatible. Not entirely. Kael had healed her with bioenergy transfer, had altered her damaged DNA, and apparently, in the process, he'd made something possible that should have been impossible. Sarah looked through the barrier. Kael was frozen, staring at the same display. His patterns had gone completely still. White. Pure white. A color she'd only seen once before, when his ship's power core had nearly exploded. The Vel'tari color for impossible made manifest. Kael, Sarah said. Her voice sounded distant, shock setting in. This isn't... It can't be. But the scanner didn't lie, and now that Sarah knew what to look for, she recognized the symptoms. The nausea, the exhaustion, the dizziness. Early pregnancy, textbook presentation. Except there were no textbooks for this, no precedent, no frame of reference. Kael moved suddenly, disappeared into his section. She heard him working frantically, heard equipment activating. He returned with a device she'd never seen before, something that looked like a diagnostic tool from his ship's medical bay. He placed it in the airlock chamber. Sarah took it, turned it over in her hands. What is this? Kael pulsed instructions, colors that translated roughly to more advanced scanner. Will show cellular structure. Use it. Sarah activated the device, held it against her abdomen, waited while it processed. The holographic display that appeared made her breath catch.
There, tiny, barely a cluster of cells, but growing, developing,
The scanners showed both carbon-based and silicon-based structures, interweaving in patterns Sarah's mind couldn't comprehend. Human DNA helixes alongside something else, crystalline information matrices that resembled Kael's biology. A hybrid, true biological fusion, life that was both human and Vel'tari, both carbon and silicon, both Earth and the three-star system 47 light-years away. Their child. Sarah looked up at Kael. He stood pressed against the barrier, patterns cycling through every color in his vocabulary. Fear, wonder, joy, terror, love, confusion, all at once, all overwhelming. "Is this," Sarah's voice cracked, "is this possible for your species? Can Vel'tari, do you have children?" Kael's patterns shifted, complex explanation that Sarah parsed slowly. "Yes, but not like humans. We grow offspring in specialized chambers, controlled conditions. The process takes 3 years and requires precise environmental management. Natural biological reproduction like this has not occurred in Vel'tari history for millennia. We engineered it away. Too unpredictable. But it's happening now." Kael nodded, that learned gesture, now automatic. His patterns pulsed deep amber. Then he placed both hands against the barrier and created a sequence Sarah had never seen before. Long, complex, cycling through dozens of colors. She didn't understand all of it, but some concepts came through clearly. Impossible. Miraculous. Terrifying. Sacred. Ours. Ours, Sarah repeated. She placed her hands against the barrier, matching his position. "Kael, what are we going to do? I don't know how to grow a half-silicon baby. The scanner says gestation will only be 60 days, fast by human standards, but I don't know what it will need. What atmosphere, what nutrients, what—" Kael pulsed calming gold, then spelled out in their shared symbol language. "Together. We figure it out together." Sarah laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. "Together. Right. Except in 66 days, rescue arrives. 2 ships, 1 human, 1 Vel'tari, and they're both going to want answers. They're going to want to study this, study us, study our—" She couldn't say baby. Not yet. Too big. Too real. Kael's patterns went sharp red, then black, a color she'd rarely seen. Vel'tari fury. "No one takes our child." The possessiveness in that statement was visceral. Kael's entire body had gone rigid, patterns pulsing with aggressive colors. For the first time, Sarah saw what he might look like as a threat. Protective, dangerous, willing to fight. "They won't ask permission," Sarah said quietly. "The moment they detect the pregnancy, the moment they see what we've created, governments, scientists, military interests, everyone will want a piece of this. First contact produced viable offspring? That's not just news. That's a biological revolution. We'll never be left alone." They stared at each other through the barrier. 2 beings from different worlds, facing a future neither had imagined, facing a choice that shouldn't exist. "We have 66 days to decide what happens when rescue arrives." Kael pulsed soft rose gold. "Or to decide if we let rescue arrive at all." Sarah's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" But she knew. She could see it in his patterns, could feel it in her own chest, the impossible idea that was starting to feel inevitable. They could run. They could hide. They could choose each other and their impossible child over everything else. They could disappear into the ice and darkness of Europa 7 and build a life where no government could reach them. Sarah pressed her forehead against the barrier. On the other side, Kael pressed his head against the same spot. 2 minds, 2 species, 1 impossible situation. "We have 66 days," Sarah repeated. "Let's use them."
Day 156. Truths exchanged. The baby was growing faster than any human pregnancy Sarah had ever studied. At 22 days, the fetus was the size of a 3-month human gestation. The hybrid scanner showed incredible complexity. Organs that were part human, part Vel'tari, and part something entirely new. A heart that pumped both oxygen and ammonia through separate circulatory systems. Lungs that could theoretically process multiple atmospheric types. Skin that showed both cellular structure and crystalline matrices. The baby was impassible. The baby was perfect. The baby was going to die if Sarah and Kael couldn't figure out what it needed. But there were other problems now, problems that couldn't be solved with engineering and biology. On day 156, Kael told Sarah the truth about his mission. They were in the hybrid atmosphere chamber, their 30-minute contact session. Sarah sat against the wall, hand resting on her abdomen where the baby was growing. Kael sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched through their suits. His patterns pulsed slow amber. Sadness, she'd learned. Deep sadness. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked. She'd gotten good at reading his moods, could sense his emotional shifts even before his colors changed. Kael was silent for a long moment. Then his patterns shifted to complex sequences. He was preparing to say something difficult. "I was not supposed to return from this mission." Sarah turned to look at him. "What?" More patterns, the full story emerging piece by piece. "I told you I was pilot, true, but not complete truth. I was exiled. My ship, my crew, all exiles. We were sent on surveying mission with damaged navigation systems. Ship would eventually fail. We would die in deep space. Acceptable loss to Vel'tari government." "Why?" Sarah's voice was tight. "Why were you exiled?" Kael's patterns shifted dark. 47 years ago, there was outbreak. Biological contamination on outer colony world. Infected 10,000 Vel'tari. Government ordered complete elimination. Sterilize the colony, kill everyone to prevent spread. Sarah's stomach turned. "And you refused?" "My unit was sent to execute order. I was junior commander. We arrived at colony. Saw the infected. They were dying, yes, but they were still Vel'tari, still conscious, still begging for help." His patterns pulsed anguished purple. "I refused order, tried to establish quarantine instead, tried to save them. My unit supported me. We defied direct command." "What happened?" "Government sent second unit. They completed the mission, killed all 10,000. Then they exiled my entire unit, 47 Vel'tari sent on permanent missions into deep space. We were never meant to return home." Sarah reached out, took his crystalline hand in hers. The cold bit her skin, but she didn't care. "Your crew, the 6 who died in the crash, they were part of your unit?" "Yes. We had been together for 47 years, serving sentences that would end in death, and I had accepted it, believed I deserved it, believed my failure to follow orders was weakness." "It wasn't weakness, Kael. It was humanity, compassion. Refusing to murder innocents isn't failure, it's courage." His patterns shifted, confused violet. "But I am not human. How can I have humanity?" Sarah squeezed his hand. "Humanity isn't about being human. It's about choosing mercy when cruelty is easier. It's about protecting the vulnerable even when it costs you. You had that before you ever met me." Kael pulsed soft gold. Then, "Meeting you gave me reason to live beyond my sentence. Gave me something I thought I had lost. Purpose, connection, hope." "Me too," Sarah whispered. "More than you know." She took a breath. Fair exchange. He'd told his truth. She owed him hers. "I told you I came on this mission to escape Earth. That was true. But I didn't tell you everything. I didn't just have a terminal diagnosis. I had a choice." Kael's patterns shifted to attentive amber. 5 years to live, they said. Maybe more with experimental treatments.
But those treatments meant staying on Earth, tethered to hospitals, watching myself deteriorate. I couldn't do it. Couldn't stand the thought of my family watching me forget who I was. Couldn't bear becoming a burden, a tragedy, a cautionary tale about genetic defects.
Sarah's eyes burned. So I volunteered for the Europa mission, told everyone it was about advancing science, about exploring Jupiter's moons, about contributing to humanity's future. But really, I just wanted to die somewhere my parents wouldn't have to see it. Somewhere I could disappear without destroying the people I loved. "But you did not die," Kael said, one of the few English phrases he'd mastered. "No, because you saved me. That bioenergy transfer, it didn't just heal radiation damage, it fixed the genetic defect, rewrote my DNA at the fundamental level. I ran the scans 3 times to be sure. The deterioration stopped. I'm not dying anymore." Kael's patterns flared brilliant gold. Joy, pure joy. "You gave me life," Sarah said, "and I never even thanked you. I was so focused on surviving day to day that I didn't realize what you'd done. You gave me decades, maybe a full lifetime." Kael pulled her closer. In the hybrid atmosphere, with both of them in partial protective gear, they could maintain contact for the full 30 minutes without damage. His crystalline arm wrapped around her shoulders. Her head rested against his chest. She could feel the vibration of his 3 hearts beating in complex rhythm. "I would do it again," Kael pulsed. "I would give everything again. For you. For our child. For this impossible life we have created." "We're both exiles now," Sarah said quietly. "Both sentenced to die in space. Both saved by accident. Both creating something impossible." "Not accident," Kael corrected. "Choice. We chose to survive. Chose to connect. Chose to create life despite universe saying we should not." Sarah laughed softly. "Pretty arrogant of us, choosing to defy biology, physics, and probability." "Yes," Kael's patterns pulsed amused gold. "Very arrogant. Very human." "Very Vel'tari, too," Sarah countered. "You chose compassion over orders, chose mercy over obedience, chose us over everything your species said was correct." They sat in silence, holding each other in the impossible atmosphere. Outside, Europa's surface stretched cold and lifeless. Above, Jupiter hung massive and indifferent. In 66 days, rescue ships would arrive. 1 human, 1 Vel'tari, and both would expect compliance. "We're not going with them," Sarah said. Not a question, a statement. "No," Kael agreed. "We are not." "They'll hunt us." "Yes." "They'll call us traitors, criminals, dangerous." "Yes." "Our child will never be accepted by either species." "No, but our child will be loved. By us. That is enough." Sarah lifted her head, looked at Kael. His obsidian eyes reflected her face back at her. Human and alien, carbon and silicon, impossible and real. "We need a plan, a real one. We can't just hide in the ice. The baby will need resources, medical care, protection." Kael's patterns shifted to determined amber. Europa 7 has subsurface oceans, thermal vents, liquid water under kilometers of ice. If we can reach it, we could build a habitat, hidden, sustainable, powered by geothermal energy. Both ships have supplies we can steal, technology, food, medical equipment. We take what we need before rescue arrives. And then we disappear. Make them think we died. Let them search the surface while we are below. Yes, it was audacious. Insane. Probably impossible. But Sarah had stopped believing in impossible the moment Kael had touched her and she'd survived. 44 days. That's how long we have to prepare. And we need to do it without them suspecting anything. The distress beacon is still broadcasting.
If we modify our behavior, they'll notice. They'll arrive early with security teams. Kael noted. We act normal, desperate survivors waiting for rescue, and we secretly build our escape. Sarah's hand went to her abdomen again. The baby kicked, actually kicked, at 22 days gestation. Impossible biology doing impossible things. Hey, little one, Sarah whispered. Your parents are criminals now, fugitives, exiles. But we're going to give you something neither of our species could: freedom. To be exactly what you are, human and Vel'tari and entirely new. Kael placed his hand over Sarah's, both their hands on the growing life between them. Our child will never be alone, Kael pulsed. We'll never be exiled. We'll never be punished for existing. This I promise. Sarah believed him. Against all logic, against all probability, she believed. They had 44 days to make the impossible happen one more time.
Day 187. When rescue becomes threat. The baby came early. Sarah woke on day 187 with contractions that felt like her body was tearing apart. 39 days gestation. Impossible for human biology. Even premature human births took at least 24 weeks. But this wasn't human biology. This was something new. Kael, Sarah gasped. She was in the hybrid chamber. They'd been sleeping there more often, taking shifts, watching each other. Kael, something's wrong. He was beside her instantly, patterns flashing urgent red. His scanner was already out, reading the data. Not wrong, he pulsed. Ready. Baby is ready. That's impossible. 39 days. Human babies need 265 days. This is too fast. Not human baby, Kael corrected gently. Different development speed. Baby ready to be born. Sarah's next contraction cut off her protest. The pain was extraordinary. Her body was doing something it had never evolved to do. Birthing life that was only half human. The baby was too large. Wrong position. Breach, the scanner showed. Legs first instead of head. Sarah was going to die. Right here. Right now. 44 days before rescue arrived. She'd survived space crash, radiation poisoning, toxic atmospheres, and impossible biology. She was going to die in childbirth like humans had for millennia. Kael's hands were on her, steadying her. His patterns cycled through calming golds and ambers. Breathe. I am here. We do this together. I can't, Sarah gasped. Too big. Wrong angle. Needs cesarean section, but we don't have... Trust me, Kael pulsed. I have studied human births, prepared for this. Trust me. He had prepared. Sarah realized he'd been researching for weeks, accessing her medical databases, learning human obstetrics. He'd assembled equipment, sterilized tools, created hybrid medications that could work on carbon-silicon biology. Okay, Sarah breathed. Okay. Together. The labor lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of pain that rewrote Sarah's understanding of suffering. But Kael never left her side. He monitored vitals, adjusted atmospheric mixture to optimal levels, used his bioenergy transfer to keep Sarah's body from going into shock. And when the baby finally crowned, legs first, exactly as feared, Kael's hands were steady and sure. The baby entered the universe screaming, high-pitched, crystalline. The sound of wind through metal mixed with human infant cry. Kael caught the tiny body, cleared airways, checked vital signs, then placed the baby on Sarah's chest. Sarah looked down at her daughter and wept. She was beautiful, impossibly beautiful. Skin that shifted between pale human flesh and translucent crystalline structures. Hair that was both protein strands and fiber optic filaments, glowing soft gold. Eyes that were part human brown and part Vel'tari obsidian.
tiny fingers that had both nails and faceted edges. She was everything her parents were, combined in one impossibly perfect package. "Luna," Sarah whispered, the name they'd chosen together. "Hello, Luna." The baby stopped crying, opened her hybrid eyes, looked at Sarah with intelligence that shouldn't be possible in a newborn. Then her skin pulsed soft, rose gold. Kael made a sound Sarah had never heard from him, a harmonics vibration that was unmistakably laughter, joy, wonder. "She can already communicate, already showing color patterns. She is perfect." Luna was perfect, but she was also a problem. Because at that exact moment, the long-range scanner activated. 2 ships had just entered Jupiter's orbit, moving fast. Rescue had arrived 13 days early. Sarah and Kael stared at each other over their daughter's head. 13 days. They'd needed 13 more days to finish preparations, to steal supplies, to map the route to Europa's subsurface ocean, to erase their digital footprints. They had hours instead. "Change of plans," Sarah said. Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. "We leave now. Tonight, before they land." "Supplies not ready," Kael pulsed anxiously. "Doesn't matter. They're coming. The moment they scan our habitat, they'll detect Luna. They'll detect the impossible biology, and then we'll never get away." Sarah looked down at her daughter. Luna was nursing, or trying to. The baby's biology was confused, attempting both human mammary feeding and Vel'tari pore absorption. Sarah had to help her find the right method. "We take what we have, leave the rest, but we go now." Kael's patterns cycled rapidly. Calculation, fear, determination. Then, yes, no. "I will gather critical supplies. You recover." "I can't recover. No time. Give me 30 minutes, then we move." "Sarah, you just gave birth. Your body—" "My body is half Vel'tari DNA now, remember? I'm stronger than baseline human. I can do this. I have to do this. For her." Kael pulsed soft amber. Worry, love. Then he disappeared to gather supplies. Sarah held Luna and watched the scanner. 2 ships, Earth vessel and Vel'tari vessel, approaching in formation. They'd be in orbit within 6 hours, landing within 12. And they'd be looking for answers, looking for the survivors who'd beaten impossible odds. They'd find an empty habitat instead, and a trail leading down into the ice. Sarah pressed her lips to Luna's forehead. The baby's skin was cool where crystalline, warm where human. Impossible temperature gradients in one tiny body. "Your life starts with running. But I promise, little one, someday we'll build you a place where you can just stay still. Where you can just exist without being hunted. Where being impossible is allowed." Luna pulsed gold. Content. Safe. Loved. That would have to be enough.
Day 200. The descent. They went down into the ice at midnight. Arbitrary time, but humans needed arbitrary markers. Sarah wore her full environmental suit, modifications letting Luna nestle against her chest in a specialized pouch. The baby could breathe multiple atmospheric types, but the cold would kill her. Sarah's suit heating elements worked overtime to keep them both alive. Kael led the way, carrying supplies. He'd rigged a descent system using cables from both ships, anchoring them into ice. The plan was simple: rappel into the crevasse that led to Europa's subsurface ocean, follow thermal signatures to the nearest vent, establish habitat before they froze or ran out of air. Simple, insane. Their only option. The descent took 4 hours, down through layers of ice that was millions of years old, down through darkness so complete that only Kael's bioluminescent patterns and Sarah's helmet lamp provided light, down past the point where rescue teams would search, down to where the ice changed texture, became more liquid, down to where thermal sensors showed heat signatures. The subsurface ocean. Sarah had seen images from probe data. Kilometers of liquid water between the ice shoal and Europa's rocky core, heated by tidal forces and radioactive decay, theoretically capable of supporting life. But theory and reality were different things. They broke through into a cavern, massive, cathedral-sized. The walls glowed with bioluminescent organisms, Europa's native life, primitive but real. The water was a liquid ammonia mixed with water ice, held at pressure and temperature that was hostile to both human and Vel'tari biology, but tolerable for short periods. Kael found a thermal vent, superheated water erupting from Europa's core, dangerous but usable. They could build around it, use the heat for power, use the minerals for resources. They could survive here, maybe. "This is it," Sarah said. Her voice echoed in the cavern. "This is home now." Kael's patterns pulsed uncertain violet. For how long? As long as it takes. They worked for 3 days straight, building a habitat from salvaged ship components, airtight chambers, atmospheric processors, a hybrid environment controls, a life support system cobbled together from human and Vel'tari technology. It was crude, inefficient, barely functional. It was perfect. On day 203, they sealed themselves inside and watched through external cameras as rescue teams searched the surface. Earth forces and Vel'tari forces working together for the first time in human history, united in their search for the impossible survivors. They searched for 11 days, used ground-penetrating radar, sent drones into crevasses, called out on every radio frequency, begged for responses. Sarah and Kael stayed silent, stayed hidden, stayed impossible. On day 214, the rescue teams gave up, declared Sarah Chen and the unnamed Vel'tari deceased, victims of catastrophic crash and hostile environment. The search ended. The ships departed. The galaxy moved on. And beneath kilometers of ice, a family began their real life. 20 years later. The transmission reached Earth on a random frequency. No official channel, no government approval, just raw data uploaded to every public server simultaneously. It showed a cavern, beautiful, bioluminescent, clearly not Earth. The camera panned across a habitat built from salvaged ship components, then focused on 3 figures. A human woman, older, hair gray at the temples, but alive, very much alive. A Vel'tari, crystalline and elegant, patterns pulsing warm golds. And between them, a young woman who was both and neither. Skin that shifted between flesh and crystal, eyes that held depths of 2 species, beauty that transcended biology. The human woman spoke. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. 20 years ago, I was declared dead. So was my partner, Kael. We weren't dead. We were choosing life." She gestured to the young woman. "This is our daughter, Luna. She is the first human Vel'tari hybrid. She is proof that biology is not destiny, that connection transcends evolution, that love is not bound by species." The Vel'tari added color patterns. Subtitles appeared. "We sent this transmission not to ask permission, not to seek approval, but to tell others like us, you are not alone." Luna stepped forward, spoke in a voice that was human speech, mixed with Vel'tari harmonics. "We built a colony. Here, beneath Europa's ice,
Others have joined us, humans and Vel'tari, who chose each other over their governments, exiles, criminals, lovers who broke biological laws just by existing. We call it Twin Moon Haven, and we're not hiding anymore. The camera panned out, showed dozens of figures, some human, some Vel'tari, some hybrid children like Luna, all living together in the impossible habitat. Sarah spoke again. For 20 years, we've been told this shouldn't exist, that we're aberrations, mistakes, threats to biological purity. But we're not mistakes. We're proof that humanity, real humanity, not human biology, but the choice to show compassion exists across species, exists in anyone who chooses connection over isolation, love over law, hope over fear. Kael's patterns pulsed brilliant rose gold. We are coming home, not to Earth, not to Vel'tar, but to all the spaces between, to all the places where impossible love survives. We are no longer hiding. We are no longer ashamed. We are Twin Moon Haven, and we welcome anyone who chooses love over fear. The transmission ended. On Earth, governments panicked, convened emergency sessions, debated military responses, declared the colony illegal. On Vel'tar, councils debated, divided. Some called for immediate elimination, others, quietly, called for acceptance. But in homes across both worlds, individuals watched the transmission and wept, saw themselves in Sarah's eyes, in Kael's patterns, in Luna's impossible existence. And some of them started planning their own journeys to Europa 7, to Twin Moon Haven, to the place where being impossible was finally allowed. The colony grew, year by year, human and Vel'tari, carbon and silicon, learning to live as something new, something better, something that proved the universe's greatest truth. Love transcends everything, even biology, even death, even the distance between stars. Under two moons, a new species emerged. Not human, not Vel'tari, but something that honored both. Something that chose connection over purity. Something that proved the most impossible thing of all, that hope survives even in the darkest places, even in the coldest ice, even when every law says it shouldn't. Hope survives, love survives, we survive. Together.